Hello and welcome everybody, this is Roland Hartmann from graphicinmotion.com and I'm back with another tutorial for HeliumX.tv, and in this Helium tutorial we will take a look how we can create this cool 3D data viz setup. So in this tutorial we will cover a few different techniques about creating geometry. I will show you how to use basic cloner setups. In the second part of this two-part tutorial I will show you some animation techniques and we will take a look how we can build up all of these elements, and I will show you a few special features of Helium, how you can animate clones and how you can animate 3D splines. So let's jump right into After Effects and let's get started. In After Effects, first of all, I will create a new composition and I will call this data viz. And I'm using an HDTV composition, and let me quickly change my settings so that my background is actually black. Okay, and now I will create a new layer and I will call this my Helium main layer because I will create multiple Helium layers, but for now let's use one. And let's go to effects and then we will use the add Helium effects to add our Helium effect. If you're not familiar with Helium yet, then I would recommend that you go back and watch my introduction tutorial. There's a tutorial where I show all the basics of Helium, and this is more or less the second, a little bit more advanced tutorial. A new feature which was not available when I recorded the first tutorial is this new search bar that we have here. And the first object that I want to create is a cloner. So you can browse all the assets and all the presets here that are available in Helium, but you can of course also use this search bar. And this is pretty cool because now I can just type in cloner and it will filter all the cloner setups that are available. And in this case, I want to use the simple cloner and I just hit apply and add it to my layer. And you see by default, let me quickly change to my custom view here so that we can see the 3D space a little bit better. And let me choose my camera tool and zoom in a little bit. You see by default Helium created 3 cubes here, and if we take a look at our layer we have a primitive here. The primitive is the cube, and we have the simple cloner that is actually creating these copies. And the simple cloner works the following. You see that it also created these 3 nulls here that are all called Helium. So in a simple cloner you can specify a name, and in this case it is Helium. And if I create another null now, for example, I duplicate this by pressing Ctrl D, and then I can create another clone. So this is how the basic cloner works. If I create another one, duplicate it, then I have another clone. So you can create clones and then you can manipulate these individually by using these nulls. And that's actually pretty cool. So I created now 5 clones. Let me line them up a little bit better. Something like that. And this will be my graph. Let me do one more thing before I continue working here. Let me make this a little bit bigger, and I will also add in a new layer or a new light, and in this case I will use an ambient light and just to brighten my scene a little bit so that we can see a little bit more here of our 3D elements. And by the way, I'm using half resolution because this increases the performance of Helium quite a bit. If I'm working in full resolution and I have a bunch of objects in my scene, it can get a little bit slow. So I use half resolution and everything is smooth. Okay, so now let's see how we can manipulate these clones. I want to create a graph, so these should have different sizes. And to do that, I can now of course just select my null, press S, unlink the scale here, then I can scale them on each axis individually. But now you see my null is right in the middle here of this cube, and this is not scaling as I want. So to fix that, we go to our primitive, and in the properties here we have this align option, and I will use align up. And this means if we go to the front view now, that our null now sits exactly on the bottom here of our cube, and if I scale it now you will see that it will scale nicely from the bottom of our cube. It will scale up. Okay, so this is very good. For now, let's frame this a little bit better and let's create a quick setup here. So let's say I will go 450 here, then I will use the second one. Let's say this will be 400. Third one, always unlink the scale of course, 320, scale 220. And let's say the last one, let's make it a little bit smaller. Just create a bit of a nicer curve here. Yeah, something like that. That looks good. Now I created my bar graph. Now let's apply a color to these, and we can also apply material. To apply material to our cubes, go to Edit, and then we are in the material browser. Look, let's go to Browse. In this case, I will use a relatively simple plastic material here and apply it, and then I can choose a color. So let's make these a little bit reddish. Okay. Now I want to add a second cloner, and with the second cloner I want to create some kind of a grid here in the background, or lines I should say, so that we can see the difference of the height here a little bit better. And if I now select my Helium main layer, and to add new objects and new Helium effects, you just click this plus icon here, and this will open up again our preset browser here. And now I want to use grid cloner. So let me move this to the side here a little bit. I want to use this one here. And if I apply this now to this layer, you will see what this does. Because of the order of calculation, now this cloner is cloning everything that is above it. So I cannot really use these two cloners on one layer. So let's just delete these two effects that were created now. And let's also delete these two nulls that were created, because I don't need them anymore and I don't want to mess my timeline here. And we will do this in another way. So let's create a new layer, and let's call this my Helium grid, or let's call it lines, but actually I will create lines. I will bring it down here, and I will change this to another color so that we can see it a little bit better. And now again I will apply my Helium add effects here, and I will browse to the cloner and use this grid cloner and click apply. And you see now they're not interfering or not causing any troubles. Now let's make our main Helium layer invisible for a moment, and let's deal with our cloner. You see that it created these two nulls. So one of them is the cubes cloner, or the cubes control, and the other one is the cloner control. I will just colorize these the same as my Helium layer so that I know these two belong together. So I want to create actually 10 thin lines here. So let me change these clones here on my cloner to 1 in the width. And then let's change the size of my primitives here. So I want the, I think it's the X size, yes, to be about 1000 here. And I will turn down the Y and the Z quite a bit, maybe to 2. Maybe we'll make it 3 so that it's not so small, something like that. And then of course I also want to make this smaller, so we will change the height here to something like 600, and the size, the width here doesn't really matter. So what I created now are these lines. Now let's rotate this cloner here, because I actually want it to be facing upwards, so I hold down Shift and rotate it 90 degrees. And now let's bring our bar graph in here. I want these to be on the same 3D space, which they are actually not right now because they are on two separate layers. And to bring them into the same space, I have to add something to my main layer. So I will again go to my main layer, click the plus icon, and in the tools, I will choose this Helium layer or comp. And I showed you this already in the basic tutorial, so you may be familiar with that. And this gets us this Helium comp effect, and now I can just specify a layer, and in this case it's my Helium lines, and now you see immediately they jump into the same 3D space and they now intersect. So let me quickly set this up a little bit better, and I will just take my cloner and then I will align this a little bit better so that it is sitting behind it, and I also want it to be sitting on the bottom. If you hear any strange noises in the background, I'm sorry, but there are some construction works going on. I hope that it is not too disturbing. So let's go back now to our custom view. And as you see now, I have both of my cloners in the same 3D space. Good. Now, just for the moment, I will turn off my nulls because they are cluttering my viewport here a little bit. And I want to continue to create some 3D elements here. The next element that I want to create, and I will do this again on my Helium main layer, is a pie chart thing. And to use a pie chart thing, or to create this, we can use a primitive. So let's add a primitive here, and the primitive I want to use is the tube. So let's apply a tube. And now there are two things happening. First of all, you see that my tube is created in the middle here, and that's not a problem. But you also see that Helium created a null. And if I move my tube now, this is of course the tube or the null that is controlling the tube, you see that there is now a cube sitting inside. So why is that? And this is because of the name of our Helium null. If you remember, I told you that this simple cloner is looking for Helium nulls. So if I change the name here to my tube 01, and now we just simply have to quickly update this. You see that by default it does not get it, but if I turn it on and turn it off, still didn't get it. So let's see what we can do now. Okay, now I shifted it, it updated it, and now it's gone. So let me quickly get my tube back to its default position, because I actually want to shift my cloners backwards a little bit. So let's do it like that. Let's take this cloner and let's take the second cloner, these ones and this one's here, and I just shift this back a little bit so that it's not intersecting with my tube, something like that. Okay. And now let's set up our tube. So let me colorize the tube maybe also in a different way. And go to my main Helium layer, and let's take a look at the options that we have for this tube. So first of all, you see that we have height and we have these radiuses, but I think that the radius actually is quite good. Maybe I will decrease the inner radius a bit, maybe to something like 80. And now I will change the material. So let's add a material here, add it, and then browse. And this time maybe we choose this material, apply it. And now I will choose a color. We can go for a nice bluish color here. Okay. Now I want to create another tube. I want to create a slice. And to create a slice, let me just duplicate this tube. Now I have a second one here, and I will also duplicate my tube null here. And now let's assign my second tube to this null. So let's make sure that we have the right null selected here. And what I can do now, I can move it up. So this null will become a little bit, or this tube will become a little bit smaller. So let's go to our settings and let's change the height here maybe to something like 30. Let's see how this looks like. Yeah, that looks good. And then we will change the angle. And now you see that I can create a nice cutout here. So that looks good. And with this second tube now, let's just line this up a little bit better so that they more or less sit on top of each other. Something like that. That looks quite nice. That's okay. And I will also change the color of my second tube a little bit. So let's make this a little bit brighter, maybe something like that. And let's do that again. Let's create a third one here. So third tube and a third null, and let's assign the third null to our third tube. And now I can offset this again. So let's offset it like so. And then again, we can change the angle here. And this way we can really easily create some pie charts. Okay. So now let's change the color of this one as well. Let's make it a little bit brighter, something like that. Good. The next element that I want to create is actually some lines. And to create lines, we can use masks. So you can extrude masks with Helium. You can either create extruded objects out of masks, but you can also trace them with a spline. And this is what I want to do next. So let's create a new layer. And this will be my path 01. And let's make this, don't know, not a color, maybe blue. And I will double click to open up this layer, and then I can take my mask tool and I can draw a mask on it. So for now, I will just go with a very abstract mask. You can of course also draw real values here, But for now I will really keep this very, very simple, just that we have something to look at, like so. Okay. And now let's go back to our composition and go to our helium main layer again, and I can add in another element. So let's click plus here, and this time we want to take a look at these splines and browse these. And you see we have a few different presets here. I will just use the first one, this spline number 1, and apply it. And you see that by default this spline is a little bit big, and it actually created its own path layer, and that this one here, but I don't need this, so I will just delete it. Then my path will be invisible for a moment, and I will call this my spline 01 because this is actually the null that is related to my spline, and I will make this blue so that that is organized nicely. And now in my helium layer I will just specify which path layer I want to use, and you see you have the path layer right here, and then you can just choose path number 1, and you see now it is tracing the path that I actually really created. Good, now this is a little bit big, so what you can do, you can change the size here, so I can make it, for example, 25, then it is of course way thinner, but it's still too much, so maybe we go with 10. And then I can of course position it. So you see that actually the null here is on the corner of our layer. So this has to do with the layer that I created the path on, but it's not a problem. I will just rotate this now 90 degrees on the y-axis. So let's hold down shift 90 degrees, and now I will just align it so that it is sitting nicely behind our elements here. Maybe I go back to my 2 views to line this up correctly. And let's take a look here. Actually, I don't know why I don't see anything here. Oh, I know why. This is the path layer. I have to hide this. Now I can see it. So make sure that the path layer is invisible, otherwise it may disturb the view. So let's bring this up here, something like that. And it is actually too big. So let's line it up here a little bit better. And we just scale this down overall maybe to 75% so that it's just a little bit smaller. And then we can nicely position it. And maybe this is the right point in time where we add a floor to this. So let's go back to our custom view here. My camera tool. And let's take a look. I think that this spline is still a little bit too big, so let's maybe set it to 65. This is getting better. Like so. Yeah, let's do something like that. And now I will add in a floor that I have something that reflects my elements that I have here. And therefore I go to my helium main again. And again, let's create another asset here. And this time I select one of these mirror presets and browse them. And I will just take the first one here. This is this helium, or this mirrorless standard mirror. So let's apply that. And you see now I have a nicely mirroring floor. But let's go to the settings. I don't want it white. I want it to be nearly black, not totally black, but nearly, something like that. Maybe we go to 15 in the brightness. That looks nice. And then I can reduce the roughness to maybe 2. So I want it to be relatively clear, the reflection. And you see that this looks actually really cool. Now let's go to our spline. Let's apply a material to that, and you can see that you can also choose different profiles. So for example, I could use this profile here and apply it. Now it has 4 sides, so this is like a rectangular shape now. Or we can of course apply another one. So maybe, yeah, standard spline again. Okay. So leave it like that, and I want to add a color in here, and I will use the same red that I used for my bar graph, like that. So far, so good. Now let's add in another element, and this time I want to use one of these icons that are included in Helium. So if we go down here, you see that we have this option of icons, and we can browse them here. And let's see whether we find something that's maybe related to finance or something. And we could either take this one. This one looks actually really cool, but we could also take this one. Let's go with this one now. It's called Justice So let's apply that. And you see now I have this nice icon. Of course, you can also import your own masks or your own paths from Illustrator by just copying them on a layer and then extruding them. So if you want to use your own icons, you can do that. But in this case now I just created this. And you see again we have a cube here. This is because of the null here. Let's call this my icon. And if I move it now, then this cube will disappear. So let's now rotate this maybe 90 degrees and let's set it up to be maybe around here somewhere. And you see that I have my nice setup here nearly finished. Let's maybe make it a little bit smaller. I will go to the two views quickly and see how this is aligned. And you see that this already has the null on the bottom, which is really good. So I can just scale it, and I will just scale it overall and make it a little bit smaller, something like that. Okay, very good. I have my nice icon in here. And now, as the last part of this first part of the tutorial, I will add in some text. And this is also very simple with Helium. So let's go to our Helium main layer. And again, let's click this plus and go to my extrudes and browse these. And let's see what we have here. So we can choose different styles with different animations. And for now, let's maybe just use this one here. This one is also good. This one is also good. I will take this one for now and apply it. And you see again, I have a Helium null, but this time I will call it text and move it forward. And you cannot see the text just because my time indicator is on frame 0. And if I move forward, you see that now it will animate in. Okay, so now we can type in our title, 3D, data, viz, something like that. We can specify, of course, our font. So let's go for something maybe, let's see what we can use here, maybe this one. It's actually looking not too bad. I want it to be only capitals. Yeah, it's a little bit too big, so let's make it 200. That's better. And now let's lay it flat on the floor so we can take our title and rotate it 90 degrees on X. Bring it up a little bit so that it is visible, and then let's just position this a little bit better. And of course I can now frame the camera something like that. That's pretty good. And you see now I have the animation, so this is now appearing, animating in nicely. And of course, if I want to change this animation, I can do this anytime. I go here and I go to my extrude, and here I can go to edit, and then I can change the extrude profile. So if we want to have this standard profile, one of the standard profiles, maybe this one here, and apply it, then you will see that it updates automatically. And maybe in this case I take another one. Yeah, this looks a little bit better. Maybe also this font is not the best one because it's very thin, so I will go to medium here. This will probably look better. Yeah, it actually does. And I will also make it a little bit smaller. So this looks quite good. And then of course I could also change the animation. So if I go to edit and on my extrude again, and here we have these different animations. And in this case, I think that this could work. This could work quite nicely. So let's apply this one here and let's see how this looks like. You see now they appear nicely from our ground, grow out. That looks really cool. And yeah, so this actually already brings us to the second part of this tutorial. In the second part of the tutorial, I will show you how you can add animations to all of these elements. And I will show you some techniques how to animate Helium elements in a nice way. And you will also learn maybe some tricks and tips how to create organic and nice animations. So thank you very much for watching this tutorial. Make sure that you watch part 2, and I hope to see you there. Goodbye.